Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Four Persons. Once again, Donald Hartley, Catholic offender, serial predator, pedophile, has decided to go on a scorched earth lie campaign towards everybody but Santa Claus, and as far as I know, maybe even Santa Claus. And although I'd rather completely ignore the miscreant until he gets locked up and goes to prison where he deserves, which is inevitable, he has once again forced me to respond to his load of bullcrap. So I'm going to respond directly, point by point, to this argument that he makes, this article that he makes, that's written on roughly a sixth grade level, and that's independent analysis has deemed him to be a writer on about a sixth grade level. Actually, I think that's actually generous, but artificial intelligence and assessments determine that he writes on a sixth grade level, and we'll give examples of that in this article. But I want to go through this and show that how literally every single argument he makes falls to pieces. So we're going to start with this. The Catholic defender faces the kind of persecution that Tulsi Gabbard describes before Congress at her confirmation hearing. And he says, President Trump nominated Lieutenant Colonel Tulsi Gabbard for Director of Intelligence. Now, that's all he says about this. But what he's trying to do is he's trying to make a link. See, it happened to her and it's happening to me. Well, not exactly. Not exactly. I myself have faced persecution for being a traditional Catholic loyal to the teaching magisterium of the Catholic Church. Okay, so are you a traditional Catholic or are you loyal to the magisterium of the Catholic Church? Because if you're a traditional Catholic in the same way that this guy is, you're not loyal to the magisterium of the Catholic Church, because this guy right here, you see who I'm circling? Taylor Marshall is well known for his vitriolic opposition to Pope Francis, the rightful vicar of Christ. Taylor Marshall is no Catholic, and you can ask Father Stephen Imperato for that. Taylor Marshall is a heretic. Okay? He's a sedevacantist, nut job, schismatic, heretic, crazy person. All right. So for Hartley to be holding Taylor Marshall up as an example of a traditional Catholic loyal to the magisterium just shows how hypocritical Donald Hartley is. Then look at the person next to him. Okay. Tulsi Gabbard, a pro-abortion Democrat. That's what she is. I mean, a leopard can't change his spots. Tulsi Gabbard is a pro-abortion, far-left Democrat. That hasn't changed. That doesn't say anything against her military service. It probably doesn't say anything against her qualifications for Director of National Intelligence. But to hold these two guys up as examples of what a Catholic is and what a Catholic should aspire to is blasphemy. These two people are the antithesis of what the Catholic Church is. Now, here's what he says. I myself have faced persecution for being a traditional Catholic loyal to the teaching of the magisterium of the Catholic Church. So I've already showed that's a lie. You haven't faced any persecution, and you certainly are not loyal to the magisterium of the Catholic Church. After campaigning for President Trump, carrying the Make America Great Again 2024 flag, walking 800 miles along Main Street in Garden, Kansas, with my flag honoring the Sacred Heart of Jesus and the Immaculate Heart of Mary, it sounds like he's campaigning for medal. Nobody gives two flying figs how many miles you marched for Donald Trump, especially when what we're addressing here is credible accusations against you that you're a child predator. And no amount of miles that you marched for a guy who's an anti-Catholic anyway, which Trump is, you march 800 miles for a narcissistic anti-Catholic, and that's supposed to convince us that you're guilty, that you're not guilty of charges of being a child predator. That doesn't even make any sense. This is a classic juxtaposition fallacy, the classic appeal to authority. See, I associate myself with Taylor Marshall, and I associate myself with Tulsi Gabbard, and I associate myself with Donald Trump, so I must be innocent. Nobody's buying that. Nobody's buying that. We'll determine whether he's guilty or innocent based on the evidence. Not knowing that Gardner, Kansas was nearby to Olathe, Kansas, which I found out was a strong Democratic voting bloc for Biden and the Democrats. That's also false. Gardner, Kansas and Olathe, Kansas, according to voting records, both went pro-Republican in the last multiple elections. Some margins were slimmer than others, but they were majority Republican each time. And that's irrelevant anyway. Again, to what we're talking about, it's not even relevant. An apparent Biden supporter was not thrilled with my support of President Trump. Notice the word apparent. No evidence to support his claim. He makes stuff up on the spot. This is classic Donald Hartley. If he can't come up with facts to support his opinion, he just makes stuff up on the fly. For all I know, this person was the most conservative person in the world. Maybe she wasn't. Maybe she was. Who knows? What does it have to do with anything? The fact of the matter is you were stalking her child, you pervert. You were stalking her child. And any parent worth his salt would stand up to you when you're stalking their child. And I don't care if it's a Biden supporter, a Trump supporter, or a supporter of Pee Wee Herman. I could care less. It has nothing to do with what we're discussing here. Issued, I learned, soon began that I was seen as intimidating to some weak individuals. Now, this line is telling. This line is telling. Let me read that again. I was seen as intimidating to some weak individuals. In other words, he's downplaying the fact that he doesn't know how to respect boundaries, and he was called out on it. He violated people's personal space, and he was called out on it, and his excuse is, well, I'm intimidating because they're weak. Who are these weak individuals? Children? A lady leaving Mass one morning was wearing a satanic pentagram, and he misspells pentagram, which took me by surprise, and he misspells surprise. I did ask her if she knew what she was displaying, and then he puts a question mark. Do you know what you're displaying? Then a question mark would be appropriate. Okay? And the guy doesn't understand basic grammar and spelling. That didn't go well. I remember that Judas Maccabeus, in small letters, it's a proper name, it should be capitalized, both first name and last name, had sent a sin offering for something similar to this. Again, what does that have to do with this situation? Judas Maccabeus sent a sin offering because amulets were found on the bodies of the dead soldiers. It is as it had happened. Obviously, the lady was not happy with my question to her. Question mark. No, she was not happy that you violated her personal space. Now, your assertion is that she was wearing a pentagram. We have only your word on that. And you're just a complete serial liar anyway, so nobody's going to trust anything you said. But you had no right to confront her. You had no right to violate her personal space. If you had a concern in that area, take it to the priest. Take it to the ushers. Take it to the guards. If you believe that maybe she was stealing a hose or something like that, okay, then confront her only that she could be detained until the priest could get the hose. You confronted her about her amulet that she was wearing, her necklace that she was wearing, that you assume was a pentagram. I'm going to assume that you're wrong because I know how stupid you are. So he probably was a Star of David or something harmless like that you assumed was a pentagram because you're a moron. During Wednesday evening, just before Holy Week 2024, I had arrived early for a Knights of Columbus meeting. I decided to spend a few minutes to enter the JP2 chapel to spend some time before the Lord. Not long being there, the choir entered into the chapel, misspelled, to begin practice. As they came in, I never approached anyone. I did not speak with anyone. Interesting how he just volunteers that. Just a moment ago, he talked about how some people find him intimidating. But now he says, oh, but I didn't approach anyone. Come on. I was not near them, but I did hear some of the singing, which was beautiful. I soon left the chapel, again misspelled, to go down to the stairs for the KFC meeting, quite refreshed, misspelled, in spirit. It happened on Holy Thursday after the Mass that it came to my attention that I was being accused of being a child stalker, which was a total surprise, misspelled. I also believe that's a lie. There's no way this is a one-off event, and there's no way he was surprised by the accusation. He had just said a few moments earlier that some of the people found him intimidating. All right. Now, he takes no responsibility for the fact that they found him intimidating. Oh, that's their misconception. See, that's the thing with Donald Hartley. Donald Hartley is a narcissist and a psychopath. And everything is everybody else's fault. Nothing is ever his fault. Oh, they found me intimidating. Well, that couldn't be my fault. Everyone in the church finds him intimidating, but that's their problem, not his. It happened on Thursday night after the Mass that it came to my attention that I was being accused of being a child stalker, which was a total surprise, again, lie, knowing that this was a tactic of Biden's FBI to go after traditional Catholics loyal to the Catholic Church. Now, we're going back up to that point that was raised earlier about traditional Catholics. And he puts in a video, the Taylor Marshall, Tulsi Gabbard video, where they talk about traditional Latin Mass Catholics that are being targeted. And I want you to look at this. Let me change the screen here real quick, because I want you to read this. This is from AI. Okay, John Paul II. No, that's not the one I wanted. Okay, for some reason, it's not showing the screen that I want it to show. Just give me a second here. John Paul II was a post-Vatican II it looks like Lewis has just arrived. Lewis, you need to turn on your camera.
Just give me a second.
Okay, while you're doing that, John Paul II, who this parish is named after, is a post-Vatican II pope, in case some of you weren't keeping track. Okay? Many of the people who follow the so-called traditional Mass, the people who Francis is combating in this situation are sedevacantists, people who say there hasn't been a valid pope since Pius the 12th or some other. Okay? Those were the people that the Biden administration in certain areas, in certain high populated areas, were targeting. Okay? They were targeting churches that held to the so-called traditional Latin Mass. Are you there, Lewis?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
So before I go into this point, I want you to expound on what I'm trying to say here, what I'm trying to explain to the audience here. Because there's this common perception that Francis is, total 100% opposition to the Latin Mass. That's false.
Yeah, it is, and we know from like people like Michael Lofton, who he gets a lot of hate, even though he does make good videos fact checking things.
Right. But what the Pope is in opposition to, what he's trying to crack down on, is people who've used the pretense of the Latin Mass to voice their dissent against the legitimately elected Pope and everything post Vatican II, correct?
Correct. What I like to call those people are they're radical traditionalists. They're not following Catholic doctrine,
Right.
dogma
So,
as they should.
so is
And
it fair to call those people traditional Catholics?
no, they're radical.
Right. Is it fair to call them loyal to the magisterium of the church?
No.
Absolutely not, right? Well, this is what I did an AI search about John Paul II Parish in Olathe, Kansas. Let me read what I said. No, John Paul II Parish in Olathe, Kansas does not offer a traditional Latin Mass according to the available information. The parish primarily celebrates Mass in English with various times listed for both weekend and weekday services. There's no mention of the traditional Latin Mass being offered at this parish. Okay. If you wanted to go to a traditional Latin Mass, you could go to St. John Vianney in Maple Hill, Kansas. So this is right here is showing that the Catholic Church is not against the Latin Mass. It needs to be contained, it needs to be controlled, it needs to follow the rules. But this argument that this guy Hartley was making, that he was being targeted, that some people were being targeted because they were traditional Catholics, and the argument that Tulsi Gabbard makes about the Biden administration is they were going after precisely the fanatics, the people that you were describing, the tinfoil
And
hat. With John Paul II parish in Kansas did not fall under that. And don't get me wrong, anybody listen to this, I don't want it to sound like I'm defending Joe Biden, because I'm certainly not. Not
he wasn't a
defending,
good president, and he
I'm not,
wasn't a faithful.
and I'm not defending what he was doing here. But what I'm saying is the idea that the paranoid Joe Biden administration that was targeting end of the world, traditional Catholics, the idea that FBI agents would be placed in John Paul II parish, which was number one, Novus Ordo, post Vatican II, and number two, in one of the most conservative areas in the country. The idea is absurd, right? It's absurd on its face. You agree?
I fully agree, and I also want to add, speaking of several contests, this idea that they hold to that a pope, as soon as the pope makes a personal mistake,
Mm-hmm.
that automatically kicks him out of the chair of Peter is a very foolish and uneducated claim to make.
Yeah.
I was just talking to a friend online on Discord about that. You cannot just automatically say as soon as a pope says something wrong, and they're outside of ex cathedra, which we know he can't err,
Right.
that pope is automatically a bad pope or a heretical pope. And because it goes back to St. Peter. St.
Yeah.
Peter, outside of, defining, teachings, could be wrong.
Right.
He denied Jesus 3 times. But St. Peter, just like many popes, got his act together and corrected himself, in regards to those things.
Yes. Called
So we
repent.
can't, you can't be so quick. You can't be so quick to say this pope has apostatized and he's not a valid pope.
Right.
You can't say he's not a valid pope at all.
Right. You cannot. So
Period.
let me read this last paragraph, and then we'll circle back on this. Then John Benko, founder, there should be a comma there, by the way. Then John Benko, comma, founder and director. I feel like a elementary school teacher teaching this guy how to write a cogent sentence. Then John Benko, comma, founder and director of the Four Persons Network, comma, began to join with the Biden FBI pushing this false accusation. This is complete lunacy. Have you ever known me to ever join with Biden on anything? Ever?
Absolutely not.
I mean, to join with the Biden FBI pushing this false accusation. Earlier, I had fired John Benko from Deeper Truth. First of all, that's more lunacy. Number one, I founded Deeper Truth. You can do an AI search. Who founded Deeper Truth? Type it in. Any AI search. John Benko founded Deeper Truth. Everybody knows this. Second, Deeper Truth is no more than a blog. That's all that it is. It's not a 501c3 like the Four Persons is. It's not incorporated like the Four Persons is. It doesn't have its own licensed music and images like the Four Persons does. All right. It doesn't have a licensed donation platform framework like the Four Persons does. And it doesn't have, it basically, Deeper Truth is two lunatics. That's all that it is. Everyone else has left. There were scores of people involved with Deeper Truth. They've all left because they all see what a flaming fanatic lunatic Donald Hartley is. Right now, there's two lunatics involved with Deeper Truth, Donald Hartley and John Carpenter. That's it. Everyone else is gone. All right? But it's a blog. It's never progressed past the blog, and it never will progress past the blog. 90% of the articles they post are copied and pasted from other websites. In fact, sometimes they've forgotten to take the language out of the advertisements. You know, they put the advertisement between the paragraphs on the book. They don't even take the language out. They steal images. Sometimes the logos, this logo belongs to such and such, is still on the image when they've got it posted on their site. Now, you know, for a long time, Louis, you know that we've paid for our images. We pay for our music. And it's not a small amount of money, right?
No, it's not. And
So,
we also, when we cite from other Catholic websites, we credit that's the source. Yeah.
right. And we might cite a paragraph and then we'll cite the source. Whereas he'll copy and paste an entire article and attribute to himself. Well, that's theft. That's plagiarism. And
Yeah.
you know I'm telling you the truth because I've shown you specific examples of this, haven't I?
Yes,
Where
I
he's done
remember
that.
back. Yeah, I remember back in the radio show, you made an entire like video about that. Not a video, I'm sorry, a show
Mhm.
about that. And I mean, it's a very
So now
immature
I want to go through this.
Yeah.
Let me finish this. Earlier, I had fired John Benko from Deeper Truth. First of all, that's a lie. I quit. I walked away from it because of his lunacy. I quit. And 6 weeks after I quit, he started spreading this lie that he fired me. Okay. So his purpose was revenge. Well, I can't say that my purpose wasn't revenge to a certain extent, but not because of leaving Deeper Truth. That was the best decision I ever made. The constant lies and slander against me and my friends, revenge on that, certainly. And you've seen it. You've seen the stuff that he's put out, the garbage he's put out. He tried to link me to the attempted assassination on then nominee Donald Trump. He tried. Did you see that article where he tried to accuse me of being involved in the assassination? Okay,
That's insanity.
He's crazy.
That's insanity for him
And
to
the
think.
persecution. I know he's nuts. And the persecution does not stop there. My virtuous account was deactivated despite my security check was current and all my training up to date. Now, you remember it was about a year ago. All right. Let me walk you through the time scenario. First of all, a parishioner or parishioners came forward, saw him leering at little children, okay, stalking little children. They took pictures of it as proof, provided the pictures, and made a formal complaint to the priest, a Father Brandon Farrar of John Paul II Parish. After they did that, okay, the priest went to him and said, well, let's get to the bottom of this. Here's what I want you to do. I don't want you to talking to any of the relevant people, any of the relevant witnesses, the choir director, the Eucharistic minister. Don't talk to anybody. Let's sort this thing out. We'll do our investigation. And, you stay cool on this until we've had time to sort this out. Right? Fair enough request. Does he do that?
Yeah.
No. Hartley goes straight to the choir director. He goes straight to the Eucharistic minister and confronts him immediately. The priest catches him doing it. He's like, what in the heck are you doing here? I told you not to talk to these people, to leave these people alone. So now the priest clearly sees that he's guilty because he's interfering with the investigation, trying to find out what they know. So the priest tells him he has to leave. He refuses to leave. The priest has to threaten to call the police to have him escorted off the property. So what does he do? And you remember when this happened too. He comes out about 2 or 3 days straight online, blasting the priest, calling him a rogue priest, calling him an FBI plant of the Biden administration. This is eviscerating this man of God who's just doing his job, which is to protect the parishioners from this monster, and he eviscerates him online. Okay? Then he comes out and says that, well, it was a rogue priest, but the diocese completely exonerated me. Now, just a few months later, he's claiming that the diocese stripped him of his Virtus certification, of his child safety certification. So either one of two things has happened here, and neither one of them are good, Louis. Correct me if I'm wrong here. The first possibility is when he said that he was exonerated by the diocese, that was a lie, that he wasn't exonerated at all. Or two, if he was exonerated by the diocese, then a continuing pattern of egregious behavior, child stalking, caused the diocese to reverse their position and revoke his child endangerment status. So now he's blamed the Biden administration, the FBI, me, the IG of the Child Endangerment Association, the AG of Kansas. He's blamed everybody but Santa Claus. There's only one person that's guilty here. And I have talked to experts, Louis. I talked to a deacon earlier tonight, and he's one of many, many experts that I've talked to this that have told me there is no way his child endangerment certification gets revoked unless the accusations were multiple and credible. So, folks, listen to me. He is guilty. He is guilty. There is no chance that he's not guilty. And that's why he's coming after me, because he doesn't want you looking at him. And this so-called persecution is soon going to be a prosecution, because the Diocese of Kansas, with these credible claims against him, will have no choice but to hand those on to the Attorney General of Kansas. And you're going to see Mr. Donald Hartley in an orange jumpsuit. So
in prison.
I'll give you the floor and get your thoughts on all this.
I remember you telling me about this before, but I never knew it was this severe. I'm glad the way that the church handled it is breaking all these false stereotypes about how we supposedly, when a child abuser or a alleged one appears, we don't do anything about it. That's just
a good point. That's a good point, Louis. The church is making a point that they're not going to make that mistake again. They're going to go over and above to protect the children. Now,
and we also have to remember, if this has never been personal to the Catholic Church, statistically speaking, it's always happened even more in Protestant churches, or evangelical, non-denomination, whichever name they call by now, because Protestants go by many.
And the reason why that the Catholic Church is targeted on these accusations is really simple. It's because the unity of the Catholic Church. Because in Protestantism, you might have 50,000 people convicted of these types of crimes, but those 50,000 people are spread out among 50,000 different churches. And then you might have 25,000 in the Catholic Church that are convicted, but those 25,000 are under the umbrella of one denomination. So it looks more prevalent. But if you broke it down into Catholics and non-Catholics, Catholics and Protestants, then the violation rate is actually about 10 times among Protestants of what it is
I think
among
we just said it,
Catholics.
Catholics and Protestants. And again, they'll completely ignore that and they'll make all these accusations. The same thing with the homosexual clergies, all the LGBT clergy. Anyone that has done even a bit of research can see that LGBT clergy are more prevalent in Protestantism and even doctrinally pushed by Protestants. But you don't see that same behavior in the Catholic Church. You don't see female bishops in the Catholic Church. You
I
don't
want to
see.
say one more thing here, though, Louis. The group that we have here is just amazing. When I look at yourself and I look at Richard and I look at Ken and Luke and William and Chantal and Cherry, just everybody that we have with this group and the great stuff that we're putting out and the momentum with which we're growing with is just unreal. Okay. And whether or not he wants to admit it, he knows that. And it's eating him alive. He knows that we are crushing him, that we're beating him so badly, it's laughable that we get 500 hits and he gets 20. It's not even close. We're getting 10,000 hits a month. He's getting 500, 600. Well, he's not even getting that now. And he knows that. And this article here is an admission of that. The fact that he keeps writing about us, knows that we're setting the agenda, and he knows that people are listening to us, that we're credible and he's not. So when he puts out his garbage and we put out our reputation of his garbage, he has to respond because he knows people listen to us and he knows they believe us. And he knows the reason that they believe us is because we tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And he can't stand that because he's a serial liar. He's a pathological liar. He couldn't tell the truth if he absolutely had to. Dishonesty is in his DNA. And our success is driving him absolutely batty, isn't it?
Yeah. I feel in a very strange way. Not to say he doesn't deserve it, he does, but I feel it shows you what selfishness and depravity does to a person. It destroys them, and he destroyed himself. So that's very pitiful.
Yeah, his own depraved, egotistical mind is destroying him from the inside out. Before we go, you're working on a number of things as far as the number of people that you're trying to get on for some debates and things. Why don't you talk about that briefly for a minute before we go?
I'm trying to get a numerous amount of Protestants that are very common. There's this one that I tagged 3 times. He was making a video about how it's bad for Catholics to pray to the saints. I dropped them. Typically, when a Protestant makes that attack, I always drop Revelation 5:8 and Tobit on them. They'll typically try to rebuke Tobit and claim it's not biblical, and then I'll show them that it
you
is.
repeat that last part? You broke up. You froze up there for a second. So I need you to repeat that last part.
I said when they attack the prayers to the saints, I bring up Revelations 5:8 and Tobit, and they'll then attack Tobit, saying it's not inspired, and then I'll show them that it is, because it was in the Septuagint, the Greek Old Testament used by Jesus, the apostles, and the Greek Jews. But the point is not to diverge. I tagged them multiple times. I cited the scriptures. I cited the church history. The guy avoided me. And all these online Protestant bloggers, they never want to debate someone that's educated. Matt Slick, I know you know him. He's on the Discord server that I'm in.
I tried to get Matt Slick to debate many times. Matt Slick is scared of debating me. He knows I've
He's
mopped the
scared
floor
of
with him.
debating you and any other educated Catholics on equal terms. Like he'll, whenever he's in the, I'm in the politics server, and he frequents that server a lot. He does not like to go into rooms where he doesn't have full control of like muting perms. He'll talk for 99% of the time, and when you start to respond to him, he'll cut you off. But you can't cut him off at any point, or you're being rude to him, or you're not listening.
Right. Right.
So I mean,
Lewis,
the
we need to go.
dishonesty.
We need to go, but I'd appreciate if you'd leave us with a closing prayer.
Okay. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Thank you, Christ, for spreading the truth and bringing about the truth. As you say, nothing that's in the darkness remains in the darkness forever. Some things, well, all things eventually come into the light. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but it's in Scripture, you know. We can only hide things for so long when we're doing things wrong before they come into truth. And I'd like to thank you, Christ, for bringing that, for showing us who's truly your servants and who's not, and for bringing justice to the people that have been harmed by this deprived individual. I hope that you can keep using us as your tools and showing us how we can serve you. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen. God bless. Love you, brother. I'll see you around.
Love you too. See you around.